with somebody that doesn't want to be interviewed, is not passionate about their craft. Brian had, and I won't mention names and I won't mention properties, but G.I. Joe. He sat down with the writer, and Brian is passionate about G.I. Joe. Sat down with one of the creators of the comic that, he sat down and was just like, this guy is my hero. So he sat down and threw the first question out about you. You don't realize, your words and your work has painted my youth and blah, blah, blah. And what do these characters mean to you? Do they mean as much? And he said, it's a job. And that was his answer to the question. And I looked at that and said, I'm out of here. I can't even, So he finished the interview. So that's why we will talk to somebody before we sit down and interview them. We'll see how they interact with the fans. If there's somebody that we want to have on, simply because you don't want to have somebody on that's somebody that has a bad reputation within the industry, and then you're going to have them on your show. So it's been a lot of fun. I can't comment on any of the technological side because Brian is the one who does everything for the show. I basically I like to say I'm the guy that puts the butts in the seat. That's he says I have lead singer syndrome, which is pretty close. But it's so much fun, and it can be very humbling too. At times, like when you get the bad review or when you hear somebody say something. But for the most part, this has just been a great part of my life that you feel like you're giving back to the community that you have loved for so much. And that's why we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that there are two sides to the podcasting community. I agree with your viewpoint on that. There are those, and I've seen it, who are really nice and they uplift each other. You know what I mean? They try to help. Yep. Hey, and if I get feedback from that group, it's feedback I can work with. By the way, you could do this to fix that filter so it doesn't sound this way when you go and do a live, show. Or I get the you suck.
Yeah.
I wish you died.
Right,
I'm like, okay,
you should all
thanks for the positive feedback.
You should all jump down the trash compactor and let it go. It's like, really, how does that help me? There are two types of people, and I think if you get into the podcasting, that's what you're going to find. There's two people that are going to, there's either a group that's going to help you, they're going to uplift you, they're going to move you along, they're going to try to move you forward, and then there's just a group that they're going to be against you no matter what. And I've learned over the years, and I think you've learned this too, to kind of ignore those people. I guess the best way I can put it is you have to be the president.
Yeah.
You have to kind of listen to those naysayers, but if it's just something that's really not really going to help you in the long run, sometimes they're just not worth listening to, and you just move on to the people that will listen. And you're creating for a niche audience, and it's kind of hard because you want the majority of the audience to be happy, not a minority to be upset.
Yeah.
So.
And it's we've been lucky too that our community is just some of the nicest people we've ever not met. When
that's the irony behind podcasting.
We'll go through, one of us will go through some family crisis or a tragedy or a death in the family or something like that, and the outpouring of support and love from these people is amazing. That we don't care about posting it. Hey, my cat just died, and I'm really hurting, and I just want to let you guys know, and so I'm kind of out of sorts, and I'll get 50 or 60 blasts just saying, I've been through it, and everybody's just loving and supportive. We, right off the bat, got rid of all the negativity, saying, don't post here. If you're going to criticize because I say every 30 seconds, don't post here. Which I don't.
It's my experience that eventually, the people who do post the negative feedback like that, sooner or later, they're just going to leave anyway. It's like, I refer to it as basically the internet flash mob. It's like, okay, we have to be hateful at this site now. And then somebody comes along and says, oh, something's going on over here. So they immediately go, and then it's like, where'd they all go?
Yeah.
Where'd that negative feedback disappear to? Oh, it's being, lavished on somebody else. I've actually had a good experience. I basically, to me, it's been a hobby. It's been, like you said, it's something I can give back to an industry that I've been, involved in with comics since I was 5 years old. So, and if I have the opportunity to meet, Joe Staton, the guy who drew a comic I can, I've had since then, or to help with, raising charity funds for an artist through the Hero Initiative, something like that. That's what makes it, worth doing all the time. To me, that's what makes podcasting important, because you can actually join that community and help that person.
Yeah, I think one of the things I learned over the years too, I actually got kicked out of a community. I don't just go small and distance, I go the full way. I got kicked out of a website. I won't name names. Star Wars families. Sorry, had something in my throat there. They had an established community, and I came in and I did not fit their niche. I wasn't the guy that fit in with what everybody else. And,
you know the new theory of evolution, don't you? if you put a keyboard in a tree with a bunch of monkeys, what you get? A chaplain. Yeah. This is true. Eventually, that's the new theory of evolution. Instead of the works of Shakespeare, you get a chat room.
And that's basically what happened. They had their nice little niche of guys, and they all got along. And I came in, and I didn't fit in, and I tried to do some projects, and they didn't appreciate what I was attempting to do. So it came to a boil, and it kind of, we all butted heads. And I was like really depressed about it. I was like, what the heck do I do? Because these guys all hate me. And it's like, after a while, my wife just turns and looks in the room where I podcast, and she goes, would you just leave? And I went, but that means I got to go on my own. And she's like, yeah, leave. Like, why are you listening to these guys? Just leave them. And I thought, oh my gosh, I need these people. You know, it's like having a pillow. You have to hug it, and like, I have to have this. Yeah. And I found that actually I was better. Once I let go of the pillow and I went off on my own, I had a better disposition. I think we had a better show, honestly, now than I had by myself, and even when I was running with Ian. Only because we left that community. It was kind of like, goodbye. If you're going to be negative, we're going to leave. Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No, it's okay. But see, that's the thing that makes a good podcast. If you don't enjoy what you're talking about, you don't enjoy the atmosphere you're in, you really don't have much of a show. Because the whole thing about a podcast is people coming together to bounce conversation off each other and talk about something passionately. Yeah. That's what it's all about. And that's why, you guys are popular. That's why you guys are popular. That's why people listen to us, because we're talking about something that people come and listen to us about, something that they feel passionate about. And they can listen to somebody who has those same feelings, those same viewpoints. Yeah, we're not the people writing the stuff, but we're the people enjoying it just like you are. Mm-hmm. That's why you're listening to us, because we connect.
You notice he didn't say we were popular, but that's okay.
Oh, hey, I'm not trying to blow our own horn,
Food.
I think the ultimate podcasters a lot of people overlook is, I think his name's Kevin James, the guy from,
the King of Queens.
No, not him then. That's the wrong guy. Kevin Smith, thank you, that's what I'm thinking of. Because
same size.
He is the ultimate podcaster. He is the everyday guy who broke into the scene in Hollywood, only because he was himself. He didn't let anybody in Hollywood affect who he was. Matter of fact, I was just on Hulu the other day. He has his own show now on Hulu, which is, I don't know if you guys ever watched it.
Comic Book Guys?
What's that? No, this is a separate one from Comic Book Guys. I forget the name of it. If you go on Hulu now and look up Kevin Smith, he's on there. I forget the name of it, but he pays for a whole bunch of people.
Spoilers.
Thank you, spoilers. That's the name of the show. He pays for people to go see a movie, and then he sits down with them, and they do a live show about, hey, what'd you think of that movie? That all spawned from his podcast, and I was like, that is so stinking cool. He is the guy who, to me, is a trendsetter.
It is a good concept. I mean, I like the concept. I definitely do that.
If I had the money, I would do it.
Yeah, that's it. If you have the money to do that, that's great. But
right.
He'd love us then to go to the movies and everything.
Yeah. We have a kind of
Kevin,
unique,
that's a plug, by the way.
we do have a unique scenario. Like when we go to the movies, how do I put it, Gary? We're like Statler and Waldorf when you go to the movies.
I pictured more of an MST3K kind.
Well, yeah, one of that. Especially if I get bored with the movie.
Yeah. Actually,
that's when I start making fun of it.
I wasn't quite sure how these guys were all going to react to like the movies. I'm like, because we were doing just the Clone Wars. We were watching the Clone Wars TV show, kind of like you guys, geek out at my house, watch it, talk about it. It was easy, it was simple. It's like, let's do that. Then last summer, we're kind of like, it's summer. What do we do? We're like, we can't have 3 months of dead nothingness. So we're like, hey, let's go start going to the movies. So we went, and what was it? Thor was the first one we went to go see. And I think it was Thor.
I thought it was Last Starfighter, so the first one.
Well, that was the one at home.
The retro ones, yeah.
But we watched Thor, and I'm thinking, how serious are we going to take this? I sat down, and I'm nervous because I'm like, this is really stupid. I go to watch movies all the time, but now I'm trying to look at it through a different eye, and I'm getting really nervous about what we're going to do. And we're sitting there and watching like the second or third scene, and it popped into my head, and he said it out loud. And he does this all the time. Like Gary will say what I'm thinking. They walk into the room, and in walks this Chinese dude, and he goes, geez, I didn't know the Chinese people were in Norway. And I kind of went, yeah, really? Because that's what I was thinking, dude.
The quote was,
What was the quote?
I didn't know that the Asians were Vikings.
There we go. We didn't know the Asians were Viking. And
I like that one better. I like that version a lot
I'm
better.
bad at telling the stories behind it. He's better at that.
My,
But,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you, my best friend in South Carolina, Tim, he and I, when I was living down there, we have two totally different views on movies, and it'd be and we appreciated the fact that what the movies do now is put scenes after the credits, because it gives him and I the time during the credits while everybody's walking out of the theater to basically rip the movie apart. It's like, he'd go, let's go see Friday the 13th, the remake. So we're sitting there during the credits, and he's like, well, what did you think? I was like, okay, let me go through so many plot holes that were in this movie, you literally could drive a truck carrying another movie through those plot holes.
And that's actually why we ended up joining these guys, Two Guys Talking, because that's how they started too. Was
Who's that?
the Two Guys Talking podcast network? Mike Wilkerson and everybody who runs that network. I know I got to plug away.
You
Right?
wanted the plug.
But these guys are really cool because they started off just I think like all of us did, where they go watch something and two guys to sit down and talk about it. I mean, I think that's how every podcast in the world started. I swear.
Well, I'll tell you. I
know?
mean, I kind of waded into podcasting.
Okay.
When I got my first iPod, and this had to be like 04, 05, somewhere around there, I went on iTunes and I came across About Heroes.
Okay.
I didn't even know the guys originally. And I was like, podcasts about comic books, let's listen to it. And, I think they were on episode 12 and they were doing the big Crisis on Infinite Earth special because it was episode 12. And they at the end, they have an email address. And I was like, oh, well, let me write them a quick email because they read them on the air. Sure. And it got to the point where, they're like, wow, these emails are really thought-provoking, and, we didn't think of it like that. And then literally it got to the point where it'd be like, okay, Jeff, we know you're listening, so could you send us an email about this, And eventually, I went out there with them, out to Kentucky. We, did a couple episodes live, and they said, hey, anytime you want to do your own branch, they gave me access to upload stuff to the site. So I kind of, in waves, I started by sending emails, then calling in, then being there, then posting our own branch version of the site. So
to follow up on what you were talking about, we didn't think anybody listened to our podcast, and then he happened to mention something about Dave Filoni. Gary, what'd you say, Gary, about Dave Filoni? That really ticked him off, man.
Well, you know what the WTF stands for?
Well, yeah,
correct?
we changed.
Yeah.
Well, I changed it from what it actually meant to what the Filoni instead.
Yeah, that kind of set off Dave Filoni. And I got a phone call from a rep from LFL. And I was like, wow, I think we actually set somebody off here, guy. I came back to him and he's like, I'm not going to stop using it. I'm like, I'm not asking you to stop using it, just letting you know.
and I've been ripping on him since.
Yeah, and we didn't actually necessarily think anybody from LFL was listening, much less gave 2 cents about what we were saying. And ironically, they are listening. So Big Brother's watching for us anyway.
No, I was going to say the same thing. It's like basically just because people don't comment on your page, or they may not always have something, that still doesn't mean they don't listen. Mm-hmm. You have an audience out there that you don't even know about. And the only way you're going to know is if your moderator says, hey, you guys got a whole lot of traffic. What did you do /say/whatever?
We got that too.
We noticed that too. When we did our very first show, we posted it, and we were like, and Brian called me up and said, we just got 9 downloads. And I'm like, holy cow, 9 downloads, 9 people that we don't know
that seem like a lot, right?
that are listening to the
Like,
show.
wow.
And then a little later on, maybe 20 or 30 shows in, it got up to about 100. And we're like, oh, this is the greatest thing of all time. And this is when I think I started to realize people were listening, was when Spawn did a relaunch with David Hein writing it and Brian Haberlin doing the art. We reviewed it and I absolutely loved it. I'm like, this is a horror book. This is amazing. I love how they did it. Going really gushing like crazy. And David Hein got in touch with us and said, oh, thanks for the kind words. That was really nice. And I said, oh, you wrote it. I just was saying how cool it was. And I said, if you ever see Todd McFarlane in the hallway, now I realize David Hein lives in England and Todd McFarlane is in Arizona. I said, so when you see Todd McFarlane in the hallway at work, just tell him I want to do an interview. So David Hein either called or did something. I got an email 3 days later that said, Todd McFarlane is expecting a call from you at 3 o'clock, and he'll give you an hour.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there going, and I mean, and it's funny because I'm not that big I wasn't a big Todd McFarlane fan at the time. I probably had more Todd McFarlane toys than I did Spawn comics. And all of a sudden, I'm getting panicky, going, what am I going to ask this guy? What am I going to do? What am I going to? So I sent him a bunch of questions, said, this is what I'm going to ask you. And then when we got on the phone, I go, did you get the questions? He goes, I can't answer it. What do I even need to be here for? If I can't answer questions about myself, go ahead. So I'm like, wow, this guy's really cool. We ended up talking for a half hour in the interview. Then we spoke for another half hour on the phone afterwards. And I will never, ever, ever say anything negative about that guy. I will defend him to the end, no matter what, because this guy was a guy that, he had no reason. I mean, we were nothing. And he reached out, and it was interesting because the downloads probably tripled or quadrupled after that one interview. And it never went away and just kept going and going and going. And when you get somebody, we do a gaming challenge every summer. We get a picture from a guy in France with a picture of the screenshot that says, you completed Zelda or whatever game we were doing at the time. And in the background, you see the Eiffel Tower. And I'm like, that's pretty funny. Is that a picture? He's like, no, I live in France. I live outside of Paris. And it's amazing. We get a lot of downloads from Xingzhou, China. Because where we use Podomatic, you can see where the downloads come from.
We've used Podomatic before.
And that is the scariest thing is when you're like, holy cow, somebody's listening to us in Brussels. All over the world we get downloads. And
I had 1,000 downloads in Zimbabwe, and I'm like, who does that?
Yeah,
it's all those Nigerian princes.
Yeah, we had about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had John Wetton on the show, who was the bass player vocalist for Asia, King Crimson, UK. And I've known John for a while, and all of a sudden, when we put that up, the downloads in Krakow, Poland exploded because he has a huge following in Poland.
Wow.
And they were all coming out of Krakow. So you notice that when you get these, you get interviews and people that you may not think have niche audiences somewhere, all of a sudden you get an explosion of downloads from one particular area. That it could be their hometown, it could be one person downloading it in 500,000 times, but we just go by the numbers. We don't care if it's one person 5,000 times.
You get David
We'll say
Hasselhoff
5,000.
on and you'll be huge in Germany.
Huge in Germany.
The Hawk is listening.
I mean, we had a situation where we had a notorious comic figure come on.
Yeah.
And I mean, literally within like 6 hours of me uploading the podcast, bleedingcool.com had that. I'm like, because I get an email, you're on Bleeding Cool? I'm like, how the heck did I? What? And,
Yeah, it was crazy.
Within 6 hours, I downloaded it at like midnight, went to bed. I get up at 6 a.m. and there's already a story on Bleeding Cool with like 100 comments.
Yeah, it was crazy because we recorded on Saturday, and we did the interview very, very nice, very polite and whatnot. Right. And he told me about us being on Bleeding Cool. I'm like, dude, we're at number 1 on Google. Like, if you type in this guy's name, we're there, number 1. I'm like, how in God's green earth do you get to number 1 on Google? You got to be insane with traffic for that. So, I mean, yeah, people are definitely watching. It was crazy.
And back when I was still, in South Carolina and just helping those guys out, one of the things I did is I sent an email to Marvel asking them, hey, who would I speak to about maybe trying to set up some interviews for them on the show?
Sure.
And literally within like 48 hours, I got a phone call from Jim McCann.
Nice.
And he puts me in touch with somebody. He's like, hey, well, she wants to talk to you. Hold on, I can't remember her name now. But she goes, well, we'd like to see if we can have an interview with you with Joe Quesada. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Oh, that's all.
Okay. Now, bear in mind, this is back literally, I sent this out in November. One More Day was about to come out in the comics, so this was just before One More Day.
Nice.
And I'm like, okay, well, it's Joe Quesada, so we're going to be like on a long line of people that he's going to talk to. So we'll probably get to him about like March. So I go, oh yeah, I mean, anytime he wants to talk to us, we'd love to. She goes, great. He's got about half an hour tomorrow at 3. Do you guys want to, do you want to set it up now? We can give you his cell phone number and you can give him a call.
Wow.
And I'm like, huh?
Right.
Yeah, sure. I think that works for us.
Now, I got to tell you one of the coolest things, and this is probably the greatest thing that has happened, at least to me, since doing the show, was we've got, we go to a lot of the New York City shows, so we know